Hello everyone, it's Lisa here. I'm back today with a card for you, and I'm going to be featuring a die from the new Simon Says stamp release, and that is called Sending Sunshine, and it is actually out today. But the die is called Flower Cluster, and they very kindly sent it to me to have a play with. So I thought I would do something a little bit different with it. I decided that I would watercolour it. It's not something I do that often with my dies. I don't know why, it just doesn't happen to be a go-to technique for me. But I thought it would be quite a fun way to show off the die and maybe show you something slightly different. So I'm going to be using my Gansai Tambi paints. I've got the 36 set, and I pick out a pink, an orange, a yellow, a really lovely green, a beautiful purple, and also a black, which I'm going to use for splatters. I start by taking some Tim Holtz Distress watercolour cardstock, and I run that through my die cutting machine with the die, and then I start to just put some paint down on a ceramic tile and mix that to the consistency that I want. And you'll see as I start to apply it, it isn't too thin that it doesn't hold on to the cardstock, and it's also not dropping through the gaps. So it's just about the right consistency, but I do 2 layers because usually the watercolour fades back quite a lot after the first layer when it dries. For those of you that watercolour, you will know that. So even though at the moment it looks quite bright, as it starts to dry, it does lose that vibrancy. So I go in with another layer just to brighten it up again. I do have all the numbers listed for the paints that I'm using over on my blog. From memory, I don't think they actually give their colours names. They just give them numbers, but to make it easier for you, I have listed them over on my blog for you if you wanted to use similar colours at all. So I'm going in now with the pink colour, and I'm making sure that I don't blend it into the green, although I don't want to end up with anything that looks muddy at all. The colours that I've actually picked do blend quite well together, but there are some instances where if I wasn't careful, I could end up with them bleeding into each other and creating a slightly muddy look. So I am quite careful about how I apply that. I'm using a number 4 brush for those of you that want to know. I possibly could have got away with using a number 2, but I tend to reach for my number 4 as my first choice. And it seems to work well enough on here. So I'm now going to go in with my orange. Again, I'm applying it quite liberally, being careful not to run into the green. And you can see already that the green has started to dry, and it sort of fades back into a much lighter green. It just doesn't have that initial vibrancy that it has when you first put it down. So I'm now going to speed the colouring up a little bit because I've shown you most of the process, and this is me just adding my second layer. I can really recommend the Gansai Tambis. I think they're a beautiful set of paints. They're quite creamy, they have some beautiful colours, and what I really like about them is that actually if you use one colour more than the other, and most of us do have a go-to choice of colours when we use our paints, you can actually just replace that one pan. You don't have to rebuy the whole set. They do sell them as singles. So I think that that's a real advantage. And the green that I use here, I use a lot. So I know I'm going to be replacing that soon. I'm moving on to the card base now, and I thought that it would be nice to add some score lines to the front of the card. It's actually quite a clean and simple looking card, and I didn't want to have too many layers, so I thought to add some interest I would add some score lines to sort of give it a little bit of a frame. And it was actually quite hard to do because this is £110 Nina Classic Crest cardstock. It's actually quite thick, so it took me a couple of times to get the lines straight and looking nice before I actually did it. It's much easier on a thinner cardstock, but it did work out in the end. So I'm just moving on to the splatters now. I'm using a number 20 black paint from Gansai Tambi. I forget to cover the back of the card up, so I do get a couple of stray splatters on the back, but mostly this was a really successful way of actually doing the splatters. I usually do them by flicking off the side of an acrylic block, but I haven't been happy with the results of that recently. I end up with a spray normally, and this actually worked out much better. Moving on to the rest of the card now, I ran my Simon Says stamp love die through my die cutting machine twice, added some Ranger multimedia matte to the back, and I stuck both of those together and set them aside to dry. And I do a similar thing on the back of the flower cluster die cut. It's now dried, so I can add some Ranger multimedia matte onto the back of that, and I'm just positioning that on the bottom right of the cardstock, and I put a block over the top just to make sure that it sticks down firmly. And then I add some glue to the back of the love die cut, and I'm positioning that down now on top of the cardstock. I put a block over the top just to help set it, and then I'm just going to move on to the rest of the sentiment. So I'm taking my Simon Says Stamp Thanks stamp set, and I'm going to use the Lots Of sentiment from this set. It's a really useful little set. I've only had it a few months, but it's got some great sentiments in it. And I thought if I add the Lots Of to the love die, then this would be a really good all occasion card. So I stamped my sentiment using VersaFine Onyx Black, and I do use a MISTI for stamping almost everything. I'm not great at stamping. I find it much more handy to have the MISTI. It's one of my most used tools, and it really helps me to get a good impression. So lastly, I'm just going to add some sequins onto the card. I thought it would be nice just to add a little bit of sparkle. So I pick up my trusty bag of Studio Katia Majestic Fusion sequins. It's a bag of mixed size sequins, and I really love them. I use them on pretty much every card, so they're a fantastic thing to have in your stash. Very pretty, and they also go with almost anything because they're clear and sparkly. So that brings me to the end of the video. I really hope that you like the card and maybe give watercolouring your die cuts a go. It's a fun way to stretch your supplies. Thank you so much for watching. I always appreciate it when you do. I will list all supplies over on my blog, and that will be linked in the description below. And also I'd love it if you give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and also subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more. Thank you so much once again, and I'll be back soon with another project.